Now, the scale of the devastation from record-breaking floods in outback Queensland is becoming clearer today, more than a week after the emergency began. There are fears livestock losses exceed 140,000 head. Some homes have been flooded, with the small community of Thargomindah among the worst hit.
Tales of survival are also emerging, including a family helping to rescue a man who spent 2 days stranded in his bogged car. The area of flooding stretches across an area twice the size of Victoria, and Nate is in Charleville for us this morning having a look at this enormous system. Nate, what is happening there where you are at the moment?
Luckily, Bridge, the rain has eased here out at Charleville Airport, at least for now. We've had a very wet night through this region. And of course, any extra rain over these flooded areas right now is the last thing we want to see. Charleville Airport behind me is just starting to get active as we see the response and aid start for the day today out to those communities still dealing with the waters rising in some cases. We've just learned that there are some new road closures around this town. We've seen broadly 30 to 90 millimetres across this region with some big falls coming in, but just further north, warnings more widespread for heavy rainfall through the interior of Queensland. It's exactly what we don't need right now. Actually, a little bit further north and dealing with the rain too. Mackenzie Colahan in Longreach for us this morning. Mackenzie, g'day to you. Hey, when the rain started last night down here in Charleville, I was a little concerned. How about things in Longreach this morning?
Yeah, Nate, it was very heavy last night. The rain actually woke me up a couple of times, and since we last spoke, there was about a half an hour break in the rain, but now it's really starting to come down again. And thankfully, Longreach does have radar coverage from the bomb, and it looks like the front end of this system, there's a lot of water behind it. We have just spoken to the Mayor of Blackall down the road about in the 2.5 hours. They've had falls reported of 100 millimetres overnight in that Barcoo catchment, and that's the last thing that those people need. Here in Longreach, the Thompson River on the northern outskirts of town is still rising. A flood watch is in place and the council has set up sandbagging stations, but they don't seem very concerned about the threat of water coming into town. But yeah, as I mentioned, that is the last thing that these people need. There's been the water has stuck around for so long, and that's the one thing that struck me as someone who does usually live on the coast. For people who live there who have experienced floods, you'd be used to seeing the water come up and then drop again just as quickly. But because the country is so flat here, it takes a long time for all of this rain to work its way through the catchments. And so even if you haven't had rain for a couple of days, you've had blue skies, you've watched the water go down, all of a sudden it starts coming down and the water starts coming up again. And that's prolonging the pain and really dragging this disaster out for a lot of communities that should be getting on with the recovery now. We were at the airport yesterday. That's a hub of activity at the moment, and that's where police, emergency services, the SES, Ergon, basically every government agency has been contracting every private pilot they can get their hands on out here to be doing supply runs into all the isolated communities around these parts. They've been dropping off fuel, they've been dropping off fodder for the cattle, and they've also been dropping off manpower to help restore power. Now, those people have been working around the clock. We spoke to some of the police who have been helping to coordinate this operation. They mentioned the stock losses. Those numbers have climbed above 144,000 and are going to continue to rise. This is what they had to say.
The reality is that's now becoming much more important to get that fodder out into the paddocks for those cattle that have survived. I'd expect it to be really at least 2 weeks before we really understand the extent of the losses. There's so many cattle stations that are still isolated that we just can't get into.
It's the vastness of all of this. The vastness in terms of area, but also in terms of numbers, right, with those potential stock losses, and they are likely to be significantly higher. Hey, Mackenzie, I was just talking with the CEO of the Merway Shire. That's the shire that looks after this area here in Charleville. They've firmly got eyes, certainly further west from here, but down to Thargomindah, where we're still seeing the waters rising. Now, the CEO told me that there's one person likely, or perhaps who'll be evacuated later today, though that wasn't yet confirmed. What are you hearing about what's going on for Tharg?
Yeah, it's devastating what's happened to that community, and even if they don't get the falls directly, the water just moves its way downstream and ends up in the town. We heard yesterday their worst fears were confirmed. They weren't sure how high the water was going to get, but it smashed the 1974 record and flooded just about every business and home in Thargomindah. Many of the residents that stuck around had to spend last night, their second night, sleeping in their cars at the airport. Most of them have lost everything, and funnily enough, the one report we were getting out of there yesterday was that the town had run out of beer, which they weren't happy about. I know that a lot of people wanted to stay behind to try to protect their properties. I think given the situation now, it's likely that we are going to have to see many of those residents evacuated that have stayed behind to Charleville. The Premier, Queensland Premier David Crisafulli, is going to be in Western Queensland today. He's expected to fly into Longreach this morning. There will be a press conference, and I know that everybody will be watching that closely to see what kind of support is announced.
Yeah, Mackenzie, this is something that's going to be going on for quite some time. Actually, you can just hear the aircraft getting ready behind me ahead of another long day of aid coming out of Charleville. Same things happening in Longreach. Thank you so much for bringing us up to date this morning, team. We're keeping a very close eye on the stories of the people, out in those flooded communities where those waters are continuing to rise with last night's rain. Even if you didn't get the rain, if you're downstream, you're likely to feel the effects of it. This is going to be something we're dealing with for a very, very long time. Still a very active situation. We'll keep you across the latest as developments come in.
Thanks very much, Nate. Let's get a check on conditions in South Australia, where it's a very different story.
Yeah, it certainly is. So we know, we've been talking about for quite a while, it is so dry in South Australia. Well, it is that dry that South Australia's reservoir levels are now at their lowest in 2 decades. The annual water security update says reservoirs are at 38% capacity, and Adelaide's drinking water is being supplemented by 300 megalitres each day from the Lonsdale desalination plant. Water is also being pumped into the reservoirs from the River Murray. The Bureau of Meteorology says the current monsoon weather across the top end is likely to be the last of the wet season. Rainfall is still likely to be above average in the next couple of weeks, but it has weakened in recent days. The New South Wales Healthcare Complaints Commission is warning the public about an unregistered person performing cosmetic procedures under the name Injector Josh. The Commission is investigating multiple complaints over the person who advertises on social media and performs injectable and invasive cosmetic procedures in Sydney. It says he's putting public health at risk and is misleading people into believing he's above board. Victoria Police's acting Chief Commissioner says he won't apply for the top job. Rick Nugent has told ABC Radio it was an extremely difficult decision and there's no greater honour than leading Victoria Police.
It requires someone for really 5 years to lead the organisation in support of community safety. I just don't know that I have it in me to do the 5 years.
Virginia Giuffre's family says she remains in a serious condition while receiving medical care after her car collided with a school bus north of Perth. Giuffre is a prominent accuser of Jeffrey Epstein and Prince Andrew, with the royal denying he sexually assaulted her. Western Australia Police have confirmed there was a minor crash between a bus and a car on March the 24th, but say there were no serious injuries and nobody was taken to hospital. US prosecutors are seeking the death penalty for Luigi Mangione, the man accused of gunning down United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson last year. Mangione has pleaded not guilty to state charges and is yet to enter a plea for the federal charges, which, if convicted, would make him eligible for the death penalty. The US Attorney General says Mr Thompson's murder was an act of political violence. More than 2,700 people have died in Myanmar following Friday's earthquake, with that number expected to continue to rise. The civil war in Myanmar, where the military seized power in a coup in 2021, has complicated efforts to reach those injured and made homeless. UNICEF's deputy representative for Myanmar says entire communities had been flattened.
And Werribee Zoo is celebrating the birth of a healthy lion cub. It's only the 5th lion litter in the zoo's 41-year history, and just the first time a single cub has been birthed in a litter. The cub will have its first health check in the coming weeks to determine if it's a boy or girl, and then it will be named.
Oh, how cute.